In a shocking turn of events, several Chinese banks are teetering on the brink of collapse, sending shockwaves through global financial markets. This development, unprecedented in modern Chinese history, has raised concerns about the stability of the world's second-largest economy and the potential ripple effects on global trade and investment. The crisis began to unfold earlier this year as China's economy continued to struggle with the aftereffects of the COVID-19 pandemic, prolonged trade tensions with the United States, and a cooling property market. These factors have culminated in a perfect storm for the banking sector, which has been grappling with rising non-performing loans (NPLs), falling asset prices, and the slowdown in credit growth. One of the first major banks to show signs of distress was the Bank of Harbin, a regional lender in the northeastern province of Heilongjiang. Reports of liquidity problems and rising defaults prompted the Chinese government to step in with emergency measures to stabilize the situation. However, these efforts have so far failed to restore confidence, and the bank's stock has plummeted by over 60% since the beginning of the year. In recent weeks, the crisis has spread to other regional banks, including the Bank of Jinzhou and the Bank of Qinghai. These institutions have long been considered vulnerable due to their exposure to China's struggling small and medium-sized enterprises (SMS) and the troubled real estate sector. The collapse of these banks would have far-reaching consequences, potentially triggering a wave of defaults across the country. The Chinese government has responded by injecting liquidity into the banking system and providing assurances that it will backstop any failing institutions. However, these measures have done little to calm investor nerves, as concerns mount about the overall health of the financial system. The People's Bank of China, PBOC, has cut interest rates multiple times this year in an attempt to stimulate growth, but the effectiveness of these measures remains in question. Economists warn that the collapse of even a few small banks could set off a chain reaction, leading to a broader financial crisis. China's banking sector is facing a systemic risk that could have severe implications for the global economy, said Li Wei, a senior economist at Tsinghua University. The government will need to act decisively to prevent this crisis from spiraling out of control. International markets have also reacted to the news with trepidation. The Shanghai Composite Index has fallen sharply in recent days, and the yuan has weakened against the US dollar. Global investors are increasingly concerned that China's banking crisis could lead to a broader economic slowdown, which would have significant repercussions for global trade and investment flows. The situation has also raised questions about the effectiveness of China's regulatory oversight. For years, the Chinese government has maintained tight control over the banking sector, but recent events suggest that this approach may have failed to address underlying vulnerabilities. The Chinese banking system is like a black box, said Michael Pettis, a professor of finance at Peking University. It's difficult to assess the true extent of the problems because the data is often opaque. The collapse of China's banks could also have significant political implications. President Xi Jinping has made economic stability a cornerstone of his leadership, and a financial crisis could undermine his authority at a time when he is facing increasing pressure from both domestic and international sources. The Chinese Communist Party (CCP) has always prioritized stability, and the current crisis could test the limits of its control over the economy. In response to the growing crisis, Chinese authorities have stepped up their efforts to reassure the public. The PBOC has announced plans to inject additional liquidity into the financial system, and the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission (CBIRC) has pledged to take all necessary measures to prevent a collapse. However, these assurances have done little to ease concerns, as rumors of bank runs and further collapses continue to circulate. The international community is also closely watching the situation in China. A collapse of the country's banking sector could have significant implications for global financial stability, particularly given China's central role in global trade and investment. The potential for contagion is high, said Christine Lagarde, President of the European Central Bank. We are monitoring the situation closely and are prepared to take action if necessary. China's banking crisis comes at a time when the global economy is already facing a number of challenges, including rising inflation, slowing growth, and geopolitical tensions. The added uncertainty from China's financial sector could exacerbate these problems, leading to increased volatility in global markets. In the meantime, Chinese banks are scrambling to shore up their balance sheets. Some have turned to asset sales and capital raises to bolster their finances, but these efforts have been met with limited success. The ongoing crisis has also prompted some international investors to reassess their exposure to China, with some opting to pull back from the market altogether. As the crisis unfolds, there is growing speculation about what steps the Chinese government will take next. Some analysts believe that Beijing may resort to more drastic measures, such as nationalizing troubled banks or imposing capital controls to prevent further outflows. Others argue that the government may need to adopt a more market-oriented approach, allowing failing banks to collapse and restructuring the financial system to address its underlying weaknesses. The coming weeks will be critical in determining the outcome of China's banking crisis. If the government is able to contain the crisis and restore confidence, it may be able to avert a broader financial meltdown. However, if the situation continues to deteriorate, the consequences could be severe, both for China and the global economy. As China's banking crisis deepens, the government is faced with difficult choices that could reshape the country's economic landscape for years to come. The decision on whether to let struggling banks fail or to orchestrate widespread bailouts will have significant ramifications not only for the financial sector, but also for the broader economy. A wave of bank failures could lead to a sharp contraction in credit availability, further stifling economic growth and exacerbating the already significant challenges facing Chinese businesses, particularly in the real estate and manufacturing sectors. The real estate market, which has been a pillar of China's economic expansion over the past 2 decades, is particularly vulnerable. Many of the struggling banks have significant exposure to property developers, whose projects are now facing delays or outright cancellations due to lack of funding. A collapse in property prices could trigger a vicious cycle, where declining asset values lead to more bank failures, further tightening credit and deepening the economic downturn. The potential for a housing market crash is a growing concern, especially given that real estate accounts for a large portion of household wealth in China. Amid these uncertainties, international investors are increasingly wary of China's economic prospects. Foreign direct investment (FDI) into China, which had been a key driver of growth, is showing signs of slowing as investors weigh the risks associated with the banking crisis. Multinational corporations with significant operations in China are also reconsidering their strategies, fearing that the instability in the financial sector could lead to disruptions in their supply chains and a decrease in consumer demand. The Chinese government's efforts to stabilize the banking sector are further complicated by the need to maintain social stability. Bank collapses could lead to widespread public unrest, particularly if they result in significant losses for ordinary depositors. The memory of the 2019 protests in Hong Kong, partly fueled by economic grievances, looms large, and the Chinese Communist Party is keenly aware of the risks that financial instability could pose to its grip on power. In response to these growing threats, Beijing is reportedly considering a series of sweeping reforms aimed at shoring up the banking system and preventing future crises. These could include stricter regulatory oversight, increased transparency in the financial sector, and measures to reduce the reliance on debt-fueled growth. However, such reforms would require a delicate balancing act, as the government must avoid triggering a panic while simultaneously addressing the structural issues that have led to the current crisis. Meanwhile, The global community is bracing for potential fallout from China's banking crisis. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has warned that the situation could lead to a slowdown in global economic growth, particularly if it triggers a broader financial crisis in Asia. Central banks around the world are closely monitoring the situation, with some already considering contingency plans to mitigate the impact of a potential collapse in China's banking sector. As the situation continues to evolve, all eyes are on Beijing to see how the government will navigate this unprecedented challenge. The outcome of China's banking crisis will not only determine the future of the country's economy, but could also have profound implications for the global financial system. How the Chinese leadership responds in the coming months will be critical in shaping the trajectory of both China and the world economy in the years to come. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to smash that subscribe, like, and notification bell for more global finance breaking news.